Dober fantasy players and fantasy football fans. The 2018 NFL Divisional Playoffs continue on Sunday, January 14th, with the New Orleans Saints at the Minnesota Vikings. Here are the players we think are sleepers and that will beat their fantasy point totals on Dober Fantasy Play cards for this weekend's playoff game. Latavius Murray is quietly becoming a significantly better running back in the Minnesota offense. Jerick McKinnon has only amassed 10 Dober Fantasy Points in his last 2 games. In that same span, Murray has 32.9. Though Murray really doesn't fit under sleeper status, he should have a significantly higher projected fantasy point total. He won't be a one-man band in the backfield, but he doesn't have to be. Just 1 touchdown, and he'll hit his mark. The Minnesota Vikings arguably have the best defense in the NFL, and that could be really good news for the New Orleans kicking game. Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram are going to amass their yards, and the Vikings are going to be okay with that so long as drives end in field goals instead of touchdowns. Will Lutz quietly kicked 31 field goals this year, including making 17 from beyond 40 yards. Lutz booted 4 field goals in the opening game of the season between these two teams. It'll only take 3 field goals on Sunday to get Lutz to his projected fantasy point total this week. David Morgan is the number 2 tight end in Minnesota, but he's been on the field a lot more often than Kyle Rudolph lately. Rudolph has been on the field for 88 snaps in his last 3 games compared to Morgan's 140. Morgan only has 5 targets in that span compared to Rudolph's 6, but if the Vikings are stuck in a close game, they might have no choice but to throw the ball more. That could plausibly leave Morgan out of the game entirely, but we'll still take our chances that he'll eke out 2 Dober fantasy points. The Vikings took a flyer on Michael Floyd this year, even knowing he was going to be suspended for the first 4 games of the season. Floyd hasn't really played a huge role in this offense, but suddenly he was on the field for 21 snaps in Week 17 against Chicago. Floyd didn't catch a single pass on the day, but if he gets 20-plus snaps again in this game, he's probably not going to get shut out. 1 catch could be enough to ultimately get him past his projected fantasy points total, and 2 will certainly do the job. We're not all that sure why Willie Snead hasn't been a bigger part of the Saints offense this season. He's getting plenty of playing time with at least 36% of the snaps for New Orleans offense in 7 straight games. Snead has superstar potential, but he's been the biggest loser this year with the emergence of Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram. If the Vikings buckle down against the ground game, perhaps this will be the week Snead has a much bigger output than his normal.